Hey, welcome to the Steel Lodge. Today we're checking out FSR 2.0 on the Steam Deck. Deathloop recently got an update adding FSR 2.0 to the game's upscaling mix. It already has DLSS and FSR 1.0, so it's a perfect testing ground for something like this. Now we'll be checking out the version that's built into the game today, because we don't want to use the one that's built into the Steam Deck for a game that already has it built in. The Steam Deck's version, if you press the three dots and go down to the performance settings and enable it there, does the whole image. But if you use it like a built-in version, it should be more intelligent and not upscale things like the UI, which you don't really want upscaled at all. Now the hope is that maybe FSR 2.0 can come to the Steam Deck in a version like it already has for 1.0, and that'd be really nice because I can already tell you that 2.0 looks quite a bit better than 1.0. Without further ado, let's jump into it. Here's a quick settings overview for each version of the game I'm going to be demonstrating today. We're running at 720p for the native version, with all settings set to medium using the preset, and then turning the texture detail up to high as we have the VRAM to handle that. For FSR 1.0, we're keeping with 720p, going down and enabling 1.0 FSR and using it with quality settings. For 2.0, we're going to do the same thing and use quality settings with 8 sharpening just like 1.0. Here's a performance comparison from an early level in Deathloop. Unfortunately, they aren't direct comparisons, but they're all running through the same area with generally the same combat. The performance on the FSR 1.0 and 2.0 version appears to be anywhere from 5 to 15 FPS higher than the native version on average. However, the FPS on all three versions can drop around to mid-30s at certain points. Now, I didn't have a graph of every CPU thread pulled up here, but I would suspect that there's a possibility that one of the threads is getting hammered when I start combat or something and all the AI gets kicked off that might be causing this to happen. One thing that's very clear here is that the UI of the native version is much better than either of the FSR versions, and this is due to the resolution that we're running at. Now we have a more direct comparison between FSR 1.0 and 2.0. 1.0 gives me this weird white border around the image, and 2.0 doesn't exhibit this problem, so that's already a win for 2.0. Performance-wise, they're pretty similar, and I don't see any major differences, to be honest with you. 2.0 does look better in motion, but both of them look pretty good on the Steam Deck with a small handheld screen. One drawback to both of these is that the UI is suffering when you're running at a resolution this low. Here's a quick overview of each image before we go into side-by-side comparisons for 1.0 native and 2.0. Here we have a 200% zoom in of FSR 1.0 versus 2.0. If you look at the texture on the bricks on the right side of each image, you can notice that the FSR 2.0 textures are much clearer. Another good thing to look at is the aliasing on the red parts of the image here, the lower part, is much more prominent on the FSR 1.0. There's also more aliasing in the plant, the green plant near the gun, and by the font, the text that's out there under the fisherman as well. Overall, 2.0 looks a lot better here than 1.0. Now we have native 720p versus FSR 2.0. Here the image quality is pretty similar, and there's actually less aliasing on the FSR 2.0 version if you look at certain things like the text and the plant. Even on the gun you can see it looks a little bit nicer. Clarity-wise, the textures look pretty similar, so overall, FSR 2.0 looks pretty close to native here. Looking at a slightly different area now, the images here don't line up as well, unfortunately. We'll go through each version, and then I'll do a side-by-side comparison of 1.0 and 2.0. Once again, we'll use a 200% zoom in here, and the texture clarity on the 2.0 one is much better. Look at the brickwork on the front of the buildings here, and the tiles on that little roof on the left-hand side of each image. The overall clarity of the FSR 2.0 image here is so much better. Look at the wires, they're a lot easier to see on the FSR 2.0 one, where they look blurry on the 1.0 version. Another area to look at is the columns holding up the railing. On 2.0, they're all well-defined, and on 1.0, they're kind of blurry and hard to distinguish from each other. In total, FSR 2.0 looks a lot better than FSR 1.0, and I hope we get an implementation on SteamOS, just like the one we have for 1.0 right now, where we can enable it for any game. I didn't look at the pipeline exactly, so I'm not sure if that's something that we can actually hope for, but we'll see. Overall, more developers should adopt it and put it in their games because look at the timeline that AMD was saying. It looks like maybe 2 days is the shortest timeline and 4 weeks would be the longest timeline for developers to get a technology like this implemented into their game. So hopefully more devs pick it up. And obviously with the consoles having AMD hardware in it, they can't use DLSS. So upscaling algorithms like this are very useful for them. And, PC ports might just have that feature enabled if they're implemented for the console version. So it's a very hopeful future for it. Thanks for watching. If you want to see a bunch more videos just like this one, consider subscribing. The next thing I'm looking at making is a Fallout 4 modding guide for the Steam Deck, and I'm also considering running a contest pretty soon here for my subscribers, giving away some Steam gift cards. That's about all. Later.